At 02:43 on a moonless night in the North Atlantic, a German submarine cut through black water. The sea was calm, but conditions aboard were anything but routine. Deep inside, radio operators transmitted a brief, confusing message toward headquarters. The wording was unusual. The timing was worse, somewhere beyond the horizon. Allied forces were searching relentlessly for U-boats crossing dangerous waters. Radar contacts appeared. Reports were exchanged. Then the submarine simply vanished. No distress call followed. No confirmed explanation arrived. No survivors ever returned. For years, the disappearance remained another unsolved wartime mystery. Records were incomplete, witnesses scarce, and rumors plentiful. Some believed the vessel had been caught by Allied patrols. Others suspected mechanical failure, navigational error, or catastrophic flooding below deck. Yet none of those theories fully explained the strange final transmission. As decades passed, interest slowly faded. The war ended, governments changed, and archives gathered dust. Then investigators uncovered clues. Modern divers exploring the seabed located wreckage matching the missing submarine's profile. What they found raised more questions than answers. Sections of the wreck appeared damaged, yet other areas remained strangely intact. Several compartments seemed deliberately secured. Certain items listed in wartime paperwork were nowhere to be found. That absence sparked speculation. Was the submarine carrying classified technology, sensitive intelligence, or valuable cargo intended to stay hidden? No single theory satisfied every piece of evidence. Researchers compared naval reports, crew records, intercepted communications, and post-war testimonies. Each source added a fragment, but never the complete picture. The deeper historians looked, the stranger the story became. One detail stood out. The crew had opportunities to signal more clearly, yet the final message remained frustratingly vague. That suggested either confusion, urgency, or deliberate concealment. If something aboard truly mattered, revealing details over radio could have risked enemy interception. Suddenly, the mystery was no longer just about how a submarine disappeared. It became a question of what its crew believed was worth protecting. The submarine disappeared, but its secret stayed hidden for almost half a century. To understand why, we need to return to Germany's collapsing war effort. Early in 1945, Germany's war machine was running on fumes. Factories still produced weapons. Submarines still left their pens, and commanders still issued orders. But the foundations supporting the entire system were collapsing. Fuel shortages restricted training. Experienced sailors were increasingly difficult to replace. Allied bombers struck transportation networks, ports, and industrial centers with growing frequency. Every resource became precious, and every mistake carried heavier consequences. The Atlantic, once considered a hunting ground for German submarines, had become hostile territory. Allied patrol aircraft crossed enormous stretches of ocean each day. Long-range radar improved detection capabilities. Escort carriers expanded air coverage into regions that had once offered concealment. Hunter-killer groups coordinated ships, aircraft, sonar operators, and intelligence specialists into a single system designed to locate and destroy U-boats before they could influence the war. For most submarine crews, the odds were obvious. Leaving harbor often felt less like the beginning of a mission, and more like a calculated gamble. Captains understood that every radio transmission risked exposure. Every mechanical problem threatened disaster. Every day at sea increased the chance of detection. Survival depended on discipline, luck, and conditions beyond anyone's control. Yet amid this deteriorating situation, certain submarines continued receiving unusual assignments. Their destinations were sometimes unclear. Their communications were restricted. Cargo loading procedures occasionally involved additional security measures and personnel operating outside normal naval channels. These missions consumed resources Germany could scarcely afford to spend. That detail attracted attention after the war. Why would a leadership struggling to defend its own territory dedicate scarce submarines to operations that appeared unlikely to succeed? Historians, studying surviving records, found repeated references to protected materials, classified transfers, and orders emphasizing secrecy above nearly everything else. The mission made little military sense unless the cargo mattered more than the submarine. As defeat approached, protecting information sometimes appeared more urgent than winning battles across multiple fronts. Whatever was being moved, someone considered it important enough to risk a vessel, a trained crew, and one of Germany's few remaining paths across the Atlantic. That raises a question. What exactly was on board? As investigators dug deeper into the submarine's final mission, attention shifted from the vessel itself to what it may have been carrying. Witness accounts collected after the war described sealed containers being loaded under unusual security. Dockworkers reported restricted access areas. Guards allegedly monitored loading operations more closely than normal. Some accounts claimed certain crates arrived without standard documentation. Others suggested only a handful of officers knew their true contents. That uncertainty created decades of speculation. One theory proposed the cargo contained advanced weapons research. Germany was developing new technologies during the war's final years, including experimental guidance systems, jet aircraft components, and classified engineering documents. If such material fell into Allied hands, it could reveal valuable information about ongoing projects. Another theory focused on intelligence records. Secret files, code material, and agent networks represented assets that could remain useful even as military. Defeat became inevitable. Destroying or relocating sensitive information was a common priority for organizations facing collapse. More dramatic explanations soon followed. Stories emerged involving industrial diamonds, gold reserves, and hidden wartime wealth. These rumors captured public imagination, but evidence supporting them remained limited. Historians found fragments of testimony, yet no definitive proof. Every claim seemed to answer one question while creating two more. Researchers turned to surviving crew records, naval correspondence, and intercepted communications. Much of the documentation was incomplete, damaged, or missing entirely. Some records contradicted others. Certain references appeared deliberately vague. The gaps themselves became part of the mystery. One pattern, however, remained consistent. Whatever was loaded aboard appeared important, enough to justify extraordinary secrecy at a time when Germany could barely afford to lose another submarine. Even today, researchers disagree on what the crew was ordered to protect, but nearly all agree on one point. The mission carried significance beyond an ordinary wartime patrol. Whatever it was, the mission quickly became a race against time. The submarine slipped away from harbor under strict orders and growing uncertainty. By the time it entered the Atlantic, the strategic situation had changed dramatically from the early years of the war. Allied aircraft ranged farther than ever before. Radar stations monitored critical approaches. Naval task forces coordinated patrol routes across vast stretches of ocean. The crew understood the danger. Every mile traveled increased the chance of discovery. Life aboard quickly settled into a tense routine. Sailors rotated through cramped duty stations, sleeping whenever space and circumstances allowed. Diesel engines droned through the hull. Condensation collected on steel bulkheads. Fresh air became a luxury measured in minutes rather than hours. Even small equipment failures demanded immediate attention. A faulty valve, damaged battery cell, or malfunctioning radio component could threaten the entire mission. Weather offered little relief. Rough seas rolled across the North Atlantic, forcing the vessel to pitch and dive through heavy swells. Crew members struggled to maintain equipment while officers continuously evaluated navigation. Reports and weather updates. Progress slowed. Fuel consumption became a concern. So did timing. Communication presented another challenge. Headquarters expected updates, but every transmission carried risk. Allied direction-finding networks could sometimes estimate a submarine's position from brief radio traffic. Captains therefore balanced operational necessity against survival. Remain silent for too long and command lost visibility. Transmit too often, and enemy forces gained an opportunity. Meanwhile, reports of Allied patrol activity continued arriving through intelligence channels. Aircraft sightings increased. Escort groups shifted positions. Areas once considered relatively safe no longer appeared reliable. The ocean was no longer Germany's shield. It had become a trap. Then conditions worsened. A problem emerged that threatened not only the mission's schedule, but the submarine's ability to remain hidden. What began as a manageable complication soon developed into the crew's first major crisis. The pressure intensified with each passing day. Allied anti-submarine forces were no longer searching blindly across the Atlantic. Intelligence intercepts, radar networks, and coordinated patrol routes steadily reduced the number of places a submarine could hide, somewhere beyond the horizon. Operators studied reports, compared sightings, and plotted likely routes. The ocean seemed vast, yet the crew increasingly felt trapped inside a shrinking circle. Warnings arrived through fragmented intelligence updates. Aircraft activity had increased along several key corridors. Escort groups were shifting positions. Reports of submarine losses continued reaching command. Whether every report was accurate hardly mattered. The message was clear. Enemy forces were closing the net. To avoid detection, the submarine spent longer periods underwater. At first, the strategy worked. Radar could not spot what remained beneath the surface. But every hour submerged created new problems. Batteries drained steadily. Air quality deteriorated. Moisture-coated equipment and bulkheads. The interior grew warmer, heavier, and more uncomfortable. Crew members spoke less. Fatigue spread through the vessel. Officers monitored battery indicators constantly. Every percentage lost narrowed their options. Surfacing to recharge risked detection by aircraft or radar. Remaining submerged threatened the submarine's ability to maneuver. Neither choice offered safety. Then sonar reports began causing concern. Strange sounds echoed through the hull. Some contacts proved harmless. Others remained uncertain. Each metallic ping forced sailors to imagine enemy destroyers somewhere in the darkness above. Every unexpected noise seemed amplified by stress and confinement. Inside the control room, debate intensified. Some officers argued the mission should continue regardless of conditions. Others questioned whether preserving the vessel and crew outweighed completing increasingly dangerous orders. The cargo remained secure, but the submarine itself was becoming vulnerable. Each hour underwater brought them closer to safety and disaster. The crew believed the greatest threat came from the enemy searching overhead. They were about to discover that the mission's most dangerous challenge might come from a decision made within their own chain of command. Then an unexpected decision changed everything. At some point during the mission, the nature of the crew's dilemma appears to have changed. The question was no longer simply whether the submarine could reach its destination. It became whether the cargo could remain beyond enemy reach. That distinction may explain several of the strange details that later emerged from surviving. Records and post-war investigations. Historians examining fragments of documentation noticed repeated references to security, procedures that exceeded normal operational requirements. Certain communications were unusually vague. Some reports appeared incomplete. Others seemed to have vanished altogether. While wartime chaos accounted for many missing records, researchers could not ignore the possibility that at least some information had been deliberately destroyed. Such actions would not have been unprecedented. Military organizations, facing defeat, often eliminated sensitive material rather than risk its capture. Intelligence files, technical schematics, codebooks, and research documents could provide enormous value to an enemy. In the final months of the war, German commanders had ample reason to fear exactly that outcome. This possibility gave rise to a more dramatic theory. If interception became unavoidable, what if the submarine's true mission was not to deliver the cargo at all costs, but to ensure it never fell into Allied hands? Under that scenario, preserving secrecy would outweigh preserving the vessel. The submarine itself would become expendable. No surviving order explicitly confirms such instructions, yet several pieces of evidence continue to fuel debate. The final transmission contained little useful information. Documentation associated with the voyage appears fragmented. Reports describing cargo details remain frustratingly scarce. Each missing piece encourages speculation that someone intentionally concealed the truth. Inside the submarine, officers may have faced an impossible decision: continue risking detection in hopes of completing the mission, or take irreversible measures to guarantee the cargo remained inaccessible. Either choice carried enormous consequences. Either choice could explain why the vessel never returned. The submarine may not have been lost because of the secret. It may have been sacrificed for it. That possibility transformed the mystery from a simple wartime disappearance into something far more complex. Instead of asking what destroyed the submarine, investigators began asking whether its fate had been deliberately chosen. Years later, investigators would uncover clues supporting that possibility. As conditions aboard the submarine deteriorated, the mission's true priority may finally have become clear. The crew had spent days avoiding patrol aircraft, conserving batteries, and navigating waters crowded with Allied hunters. Yet evidence uncovered after the war suggests survival may never have been the highest objective. Protecting the cargo appears to have taken precedence over everything else. Researchers studying surviving naval documents noticed unusual patterns. Certain records connected to the voyage were incomplete. Others disappeared entirely. References that should have contained specific cargo information instead used vague language or coded descriptions. While wartime confusion undoubtedly destroyed many files, some historians believe portions of the record may have been intentionally eliminated before the submarine's loss. That possibility aligns with procedures used throughout the war. Sensitive material was often destroyed when capture appeared likely. Intelligence reports, encryption systems, technical blueprints, and classified research represented assets that could remain valuable long after a battle was lost. In Germany's final months, preventing such information from reaching Allied hands became increasingly important. This has led to one of the most controversial theories surrounding the submarine. Some researchers argue commanders may have issued contingency orders authorizing extraordinary measures if interception became unavoidable. Under such circumstances, preserving the secret would outweigh preserving the vessel. The submarine would cease being a transport platform and become a vault that could never be opened. No surviving document explicitly confirms such an order. Yet several details continue to fuel speculation. The final radio transmission provided remarkably little information. Cargo records remain fragmented. Witness testimony contains unexplained gaps. Most importantly, no evidence has ever emerged, showing that the mysterious cargo was recovered by Allied forces. Inside the submarine, officers may have understood the implications. Every sonar contact, every radar warning, and every intelligence report narrowed their options. If enemy forces closed the distance, they might face a decision no crew wanted to make: continue the mission and risk capture, or ensure the cargo vanished with the vessel itself. The submarine may not have been lost because of the secret. It may have been sacrificed for it. That possibility transformed a wartime disappearance into something far darker. The mystery was no longer about what sank the submarine. It was about whether its destruction had become part of the mission. Years later, investigators would uncover clues supporting that possibility. In the years following the war, the disappearance of the submarine evolved from a military incident into a lasting historical mystery. What began as a wartime loss at sea gradually transformed into a subject of debate among naval historians, divers, and intelligence analysts. Each new fragment of evidence seemed to deepen the uncertainty rather than resolve it. Researchers returned repeatedly to surviving archives, comparing crew logs, intercepted communications, and partial operational reports, yet the record remained incomplete. Some documents were missing entirely, while others contained contradictions that could not easily be reconciled. Physical evidence recovered from the wreck site added further complexity, offering clues that pointed in multiple directions without confirming a single conclusion. Over time, the case became a powerful example of how warfare is not only fought with weapons, but also with information. In the final months of the conflict, secrecy often carried as much weight as firepower. Decisions were shaped not just by tactical necessity, but by the fear of what an enemy might learn if capture occurred. In that environment, the boundary between survival and sacrifice became increasingly blurred. The submarine's fate reflects that tension, whether lost through combat, accident, or deliberate action. Its disappearance highlights the extreme measures taken when information itself becomes a strategic asset. The ocean preserved the evidence, but not the certainty. The secret survived longer than the nation that created it. Before we close, consider one final question. The story does not end with a confirmed answer. It ends with fragments, competing theories, and a silence that still leaves room for interpretation. Some evidence points toward combat loss. Some suggest mechanical failure. Others hint at a deliberate act carried out to protect, something never fully identified. Each possibility carries its own logic, yet none fully closes the case. What remains is the question that has driven researchers for decades. Why did the submarine truly disappear? And what was so important that it may have been protected at any cost? What do you think was hidden aboard? Join the discussion below.